Hello and welcome to our Clair Obscur Expedition 33 ending discussion. This discussion is going to be filled with spoilers from people that have completely finished the game, and at least two of us have seen both of the endings. I am joined by Oliver Brandt.
Hi.
Hi.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. And Ryan Woodrow.
Hey.
Are you happy to be here?
I am happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about this game in any capacity because I love it so much.
Fantastic. And I am Dave Breens, and I have, in fact, finished the game at long last. And that's why I need people to explain to me all of the context that went way over my head. And it feels like all of the big story spoilers basically begin at Act 2, the climax of Act 2, where we find a whole bunch of shit out, including the true identity of Myel. From my perspective, from what I've been understanding of this game, someone will have to clear up my understanding. So Myel is actually Alicia from the quote-unquote real world outside of the canvas, who implanted herself into the canvas in the form of a young girl that lived her entire life in there, and then discovered that she was an accidental reincarnation of herself.
So
please help me.
No. she goes into the canvas, at which point the paintress, who is her mother, basically paints over her, and she becomes Myel and forgets that she was Alicia. Is how it works.
Okay. Why'd she paint over her? Because
her mother doesn't wants to stay with the perfect family she's created.
I see. Fantastic. Okay. How do we feel about that plot point, Ryan? You seem to have a love for the game. Hit me with it.
I do. I enjoyed how it recontextualized the world without completely changing the focus of the story. I know when you first got to that point, you said it felt a bit like it was all a dream twist. But yeah. I think it's a lot better than something like that, because none of the characters' progression up until that point was erased, and it's not like none of it ever happened, you know?
Ollie?
Yeah, I mean, I initially did have that knee-jerk reaction where it was like, okay, none of all of the stuff that I've done matters anymore. But I think, in hindsight, having seen what comes after it, I think it's a really good twist in the sense that, the whole point, right, was that, it was always a doomed expedition, right? That was it. And, even when they won, they lost the expedition because they didn't know exactly what they were actually fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they got to the end and then nothing, they were just completely in the dark the entire time. And that's a through line that I think starts right at the very beginning when they land, outside of Lumiere. And it is a situation where they were in the dark right from the get-go. And I think that carries throughout the entire game. And it also kind of ties into the Verso stuff with lying to Myel and stuff too. So,
right, this is it, because the game keeps faking you out on who the protagonist is, right? Because we start off with Gustav, and that ends really well, and then it hands Verso to you, and it's like, okay, well, I guess he's the new protagonist who he clearly knows more than we do at this point in the story, but he's clearly now going to be our perspective character. Meanwhile, they keep slowly building up Myel's importance in the background so that when Act 3 starts, they go, no, she's the true protagonist of this story.
Interesting. And how do we feel about Verso and his reveal?
I think when you fight off against the paintress and she's like, oh, you're not Verso, and he's like, no, Verso's dead. And they're like, that doesn't get explained for a while. I think that's such a good narrative hook going into this extended finale, because you kind of understand when you get the whole Myel reveal and that she's actually Alicia and all of this stuff. You kind of get the sense, you don't get the full backstory. You don't know that Verso actually died in the real world.
Yeah.
or the extent of what that means when there's these canvas worlds. So
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Verso being like the perfect memories of like grieving parents is like, and you know, kind of slowly teasing that out throughout the finale, I think is a really, really effective narrative hook, because like there's not a whole lot of reason to really care about Verso beyond the fact that he's quite cool up until that point.
He's
And
voiced by
then
Ben Starr.
suddenly there's, yeah, exactly, right? It's like, this is Ben Starr, that's cool. He's a cool character. But like there's not really any reason to care about him. And then suddenly when he's like, you know, Verso's dead, and we start getting these like little bits of reveals about who this Verso actually is and how the world works, it gives you so much more reason to care about him as a character, because at that point he is kind of like the analog for the entire like painted world, right? Like he doesn't exist really. He's just the fake memories of somebody who falsely remembers a character that they've built up in their head, right? It's like Aline is
Yeah, his soul is basically the core of this world.
Yeah.
And it's just the fact that his mother can't let that go. But I also like that this recontextualizes a lot of his actions through Act 2, because there were points in Act 2 where I was frustrated with Verso of like, you clearly know what's going on here. Why aren't you telling the other characters? Because it's like it at some points it felt like, oh, he's just telling things because we the audience aren't supposed to know yet. But then once the whole scheme is revealed and that actually he seeks the destruction of the canvas and to let go of Verso's soul for the sake of his mother, it's like, oh, okay, no, I see why he was holding back the whole time, and it makes those interactions less frustrating by proxy.
It's also a
Yeah.
situation where like he, you know, he's not real, but like he does have like real feelings and emotions, and like, you know, from his internal perspective, he is a being that exists. And like him seeing that, like he knows the consequences if the painting gets destroyed, right? He knows that, you know, Esquire and Monoko, like they will disappear. And like he is friends with them. He does care about them. He does, you know, I think there's a
they're his childhood creations.
Yeah. But there's like an expedition log at some point throughout the game, where like from the perspective of Verso, where like he says like everybody in this world deserves like the chance to exist, and that was obviously from a long while back. I think it's like happens around the time of like expedition like 50 or 60 or something. It's like in the first like couple decades, or like the first few decades of the expedition thing. So like, you know, some 50 years ago.
He also has, sorry, you weren't finished.
Yeah, it's just like he strongly believed back then that like people did have this right to exist even if they weren't actually real. Because
he has a different perspective on his family as well. It's like, it's clear he cares for Myel, but also through his interactions and through Myel's relationship scene, you see that he views the painted version of Alicia more as his sister than he does Myel, through the way that he treats her, you know?
Yeah. Because like, you know, he does lie to Myel like constantly through the game. Like constantly. But like he never says a single word of a lie to the painted Alicia. Like it is everything he says earnestly.
There's one moment which again I went back on and realised where he lets it slip at the end of the old Lumiere section where you see the mansion briefly, and like Renoir attacks Myel and he shouts Alicia's name, and in the moment you think, oh, it's the one that's in the mansion, but no, he's shouting it at Myel, but you don't realise it at that moment. And I think that kind of thing is what I think is the best kind of foreshadowing to a twist, where you don't realise until after the fact that it was foreshadowing the whole time.
Yeah.
Verso was killed by the writers.
He sure was. I'm interested in that bit of world building because as far as Expeditions 33's plot goes in a self-contained fashion, it doesn't really matter who the writers are. But in a world where we've already established that these painters can apparently create whole worlds with people's souls and stuff like this to varying degrees of power, it does make me interested in any potential future things set in this universe of like, well, what's the writers' powers? What do they do? And why do they hate the painters? You know, why did they try and kill this family?
I do wonder if that will actually. I do wonder in general if this is a world that wants to be expanded on, or if that was just a very, very fun line to throw in there. Because I mean, you know, yes, the writers killed Verso, but also the writers killed Verso. You know what I mean?
See, that's the thing. This is something that I discussed with Ryan, and that like the writers could be another faction in this world, or it could literally be the writers of the game, right? And these like painters are fighting against the fate that the writers have decided for them, right? It's a war against the writers, and that would be a very interesting meta thing. It would be a very dumb French cinema thing where it's like, oh, we're rebelling against the writers.
We've already seen a few takes online around this game, people angry that they interpret the writers as the game like becoming about, you know, the writers talking about themselves and examining how they write stories, and it is a little bit about that, but it's not as much about that as some people have taken it to mean. But you're right, if they do make another game in this universe, for all we know, that could be the direction it goes in, and that would be bad.
For now, I think it's Schrodinger's antagonist, where it is kind of both. You know?
Yeah. But I think one of the interesting aspects is this is something that I didn't pick up on, but one of my friends has just finished playing through it. When you do go to like the real world and you see like Myel's room and stuff, she has like typewriters and like writing implements in there, and like you think about like Verso as well as like the one thing that we know about Verso is that he's a musician. Like he was a musician, he wrote music. So like it seems like, you know, there were like these sort of warring professions, I guess. Like, you know, there are the painters who paint things, and then like Alicia and Verso sort of went in a different direction where like their talents were more you know, angled towards the writers.
You get a hint of that when in the few interactions with Clair, who one of my complaints is that she's basically barely in the game. It's sort of like you interact with her in the one scene in the real world, and then Verso and Myel occasionally talk about her, but you constantly get the idea of like Clair is clearly the most powerful painter in the family. So Verso and Alicia have these feelings of like, well, never going to live up to that, so maybe we should do something else. But I am interested, yes, as I say, in this idea of the world where different forms of art have different power. But I'm also happy for that to remain vaguely defined if this does end up being a one-off, you know?
Yeah. So there's going to be the writers, the painters, the musicians,
and the AI generators.
If the QA testers get involved, it's going to go crazy.
Your joke was better, damn it.
Right. Speaking of Alicia, Ryan, she does appear in the game within the canvas, and her story comes to a climax in an optional area, the tower. And once you finally get to the tower, I feel like Ollie's already touched on it slightly. The tone shifts. You want to break it down for me?
Me or Ryan?
Either one.
Go on. All right.
I said go on first.
I think, yeah, it is a tonal shift because like we start to see the expectations, like the tower, and you know that whole situation is the representation of the expectations that her Alicia / Myel's parents have for her. So it's like, you know, you have to keep, you know, moving upwards. They have these super high expectations where it's like you have to reach these heights. And I think, you know, that sort of comes to term, like, you know, comes to a head at the top of the tower when like Myel and Alicia do sort of meet, and it's one of those situations where, like, yeah, they fight, but also like not really. Like, it's really weird where it's like it's an instance where like it was less of a fight and more of like an acceptance of each other. So like, Myel accepted that like Alicia was the expectation, or like the perfect version of her, that Aline painted, and like Alicia, being that perfect version, accepted that like Myel isn't that. So they kind of accepted each other as equals, like two different parts of the same person, right? There's like the ideal, and then there's like the reality, which is weird to think about in Myel being the reality of Alicia, because she's not.
And I think it's interesting that Alicia deliberately removes Verso from that scene.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, and afterwards he's annoyed about it that he wasn't involved. But it's clear that she wanted Myel to be the one to make these decisions,
Yeah. And that kind of...
Sorry.
That is like kind of flipped in like the very ending scene where like, Alicia wanted, the painted Alicia wanted Myel to be the one to make the decision about her fate. Whereas like the opposite is true when you get to the end, and if you like Verso, the painted Verso wants to be the one that decides what happens to, the last fragment of the real Verso. Like he wants to have control over that. So like it creates like a really interesting through line there where like Verso feels like Alicia didn't get the choice because Myel was the one who made the choice. Whereas like he wants to give, the real Verso, or whatever is left of it, the choice to not paint anymore. So yeah, but it was, I don't know, I think that's like one of the coolest scenes in the game where Alicia like pulls Myel out of the out of reality to like just have those two one-on-one. I took like 40 screenshots of that scene. It's so cool.
I agree. One-on-one was a very, very good choice of that.
It was, and it again feeds into the artist power thing, because a lot of Myel's attacks moves are very dance-like. They are these graceful movements, and a lot of people who put sword arts into their fiction do draw that metaphor to dance, and I like that it keeps that theme. But while you're talking, then I suddenly had a thought, and I might be completely clutching at straws with a theory here. But what if the three axons are the paintress's interpretation of their children? Because you've got the reaching tower for Alicia, you've got Siren, who's about this enthralling music and constantly being drawn to it, which is Verso, and then, granted, we don't necessarily know enough about Clair to draw this one, but this idea of visages being constantly changing masks depending on the situation, that certainly, while it's not explicitly stated, it certainly would be aligned with the character profile that we have for Clair.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely...
That's just a fun little thing I thought of.
The axons are definitely supposed to be like representations of the children. I think that is like somewhat explained to some degree. But yeah. I mean, like, even like because they have like these like little like... I'm blanking on the word, but they have like these little names, like the one who hides truth and lies and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And like
monikers.
That, and like that is like, that does sound a lot like Verso, doesn't it? Because he does hide truth in lies and vice versa. So yeah, but I do wish we had seen more of Clair, because like, I don't know, it feels, as she stands, it's like they were just like leaving the door open for like a DLC.
But then again, I suppose it's the idea is she's not there because she's the one living in the real world. The rest of the family are focused on the painting. Renoir's trying to get Myel and I I cannot remember the wife's name for the life of me. They say it like 3 times.
Aline.
Aline, thank you. They try to get it. He's trying to get them out of the painting. They're trying to live in the painting. Meanwhile, Claire's the one off fighting these unseen writers out in the real world. So I guess to that extent, it does make sense that she's not really in the story, because that mostly takes place within the canvas.
Mm.
Right, since we're here, might as well go straight into it. They're using, this family's using the canvas as almost a distraction from their grief of losing their real son, brother. I want to say it's like a direct metaphor for something else, but I can't exactly line it up with anything perfectly in my mind, you know?
I mean, yeah, the whole thing's just one big coping mechanism, you know? It's sort of like this idea that this was... in a way, it's the same as, like, desperately holding on to, like, someone who's died if they had this, like, teddy bear that they really loved. You know, just holding that as tight as you can, because you don't want to let that last vestige of thing that they love go. Only in this case, it's something that Verso literally put part of his soul into, you know?
Yeah.
I think, like, it's showing, like, how different people, like cope with losing someone as well, right? Because, like, we know that Aline went in first and she started creating, like, she wanted to add on to his legacy. She was like, he created this legacy and I want to make it the best version that it could possibly be. Whereas, like, Renoir was like, no, we need to keep it exactly the same as it was. Like, this is Verso's painting. This is his creation. We need to keep it identical to how it was, which how you got, like, the birth and, like, homage thing that was happening was, like, Renoir erasing Aline's creations. Because he wanted the painting to stay exactly as it was. And then you have, like, Alicia / Myel, who's, like, all she wants to do is not think about that grief. She just wants to live in that moment, in that last moment that she had with Verso, which is what the painting represents to her, is that, like, she and Verso used to play in the painting as children, and she just wants to continue doing that forever. So, like, she's just like, let's just, like, put everything on pause. I want to live in this painting forever. I don't want to have to deal with the fact that I've lost my brother. I just want to you know, hang out with him forever. And then, yeah, so it's like 3 people, like, you know, approaching grief in very different ways. And then you've got Clair outside of the painting who, like, has moved on. She is coping with it arguably healthier than most people, but she's also kind of just denying it in a way. She's just like, well, none of this matters. And, you know, it doesn't matter that he's in there. Like, I'm just focusing entirely on other things. So, yeah,
and you get this, you get the sense just through tone of voice that she kind of looks down on the rest of her family for getting hung up on it, you know?
Yeah.
Which, as you say, is how some people deal with grief. They just retreat into themselves and shut everyone else out.
Just depends how long they were in that painting for. In the real world, it's hard to say.
Yes,
yeah,
the perspective of time from the painting to the real world is unclear.
Yeah.
Because fucking Renoir was based as, like, the fucked up geezer. I can't remember his name. He was there for 67 years.
Curator, was he?
Yeah, that's it, curator. Yeah. I wanted to say contenter. I was like, that's not it. But yeah, no, he was supposed to be in there for 67 years. Who knows how long that was in real time?
Well, presumably couldn't have been 67 years.
No, because we see Alicia go in. She doesn't seem to have aged that much since they all went in. Couldn't have been more than, like, a couple of weeks or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really hard to say. But it's interesting. And I do think that like, difference in time gives the characters inside the world a completely different perspective from the characters outside of it. And it's kind of why some of them are so blasé about things.
I think something as well, just before we move on from that, like, it is kind of shown as well that, like, stuff that happens in the painting does affect the real world too. Not only in, you know, one of the endings that we'll get to in a bit, but, like, when Alicia goes into the painting, Clair says, like, oh yeah, like, and paint yourself a new, like, voice box as well. because she couldn't talk, and then when she is like shown in a later scene, she can talk. So
she couldn't talk, but she could still perfectly communicate, which is
Yeah.
something I don't quite understand.
yeah, but yeah, it was like, you know, just paint yourself a new voice box while you're in there. So like it's clear that like what is happening in the painting does have ramifications for the people outside of the painting as well.
Yeah.
It's just not clear how that happens or how time works. Like, isn't like a Dragon Ball Z like hyperbolic time chamber situation where like, you know, 1 day inside the painting is 3 days outside of the painting? Like, what? I'm
That
curious
shows a lot
to
of
know.
that shows a lot of difference about our backgrounds, because you went to Dragon Ball Z. I was going to go to Narnia.
God, how long are they in Narnia for?
Like
Well, they
half their
become
lives,
adults and then they
and then
come out like
come out as
3
kids, yeah.
minutes later.
What the hell?
It's all just an allegory for heaven anyway. It doesn't matter.
What the hell?
Did you not know Narnia's super Christian?
Oh, I don't.
Aslan's
you know.
Jesus.
Yeah. He literally
Yeah.
gets killed and then rises 3 days later. That's the whole point.
The whole series ends with them all dying, and that's the happy ending, because they go to heaven.
The
So
rapture.
we've got off topic here.
There's a rapture in Narnia?
No, they're all in a car crash.
Oh, I thought they just fucking euthanized a lion. On the subject of euthanasia, Myel then goes around the world collecting chroma from dead bodies.
She sure does.
I like this. I feel like in the cutscene when they were discussing this, it felt like they were building up to it being a thing you do in gameplay, and then they just play a cutscene of her collecting it all. And I was like, you know what? Probably for the best.
Yeah, I'm happy they did it that way. It would have killed the momentum of the narrative if we were just like, okay, now we're going to go for another 10 hours, do another lap of the world.
Yeah, it kind of also like when you think about it, like Act 3 is basically, it's either you can either go to the final boss and the final stage, or you can like do a lot of quote unquote optional stuff, you know. I feel like there is probably a design document somewhere where that was like one of the only things you did in Act 3, like, you know, and they're like, yeah, it's just.
Yeah, you mentioned that the stuff in the Reacher should have been part of the main plot. I wonder if at some point it was meant to be part of that thread,
Yeah.
but then when they decided to cut that, there wasn't any natural place to put it, so they shoved it into Myel's relationship quest instead.
Well,
yeah, maybe.
It kind of makes sense as well because previously you needed to get the chroma from the other two Nexons, right? In order to like break the barrier. So it's like, okay, well, the third Nexon is probably going to have a shit ton of chroma. So like that does feel like a part of it. But yeah, I am very glad that we didn't have to go around the world and collect it. Because like they started talking about it and I was like, shit, like I don't remember where the most dead... I know there was like that like war zone area. And like I know there's a lot of dead bodies there, but I don't remember where other ones are. Like how many am I going to have to find?
Yeah.
Like there's no map or anything in these levels, so like I couldn't even use that to navigate to somewhere. Like, is it a situation where I have to find all of the journals? Because like there's always dead people with the journals, so maybe that's it. So yeah, I'm very glad that it wasn't a necessity.
It would have been a good way to call back to those classic games though, because I do like, again, just thinking about it reminds me of the Wind Waker Triforce Hunt or the end of Metroid Prime, where you've got to like find, what are they, the orbs, the Chozo orbs, and there's like the
MacGuffins.
There's like 20 of them hidden in stupid places around the level. Anyway,
but like in the other sense, right? Like yes, it would have been like Wind Waker, but then the decision that they made at the end was rather to go with something that was more like Breath of the Wild, where like you can do all of this extra stuff that makes it a whole lot easier. Like one of the things, like you can get the family portrait, and then if you like chuck it in the mansion, like that actually makes a difference in the final fight, one of the final fights. So like, and that's kind of like Breath of the Wild, where like you can just go straight to Ganon, and you have to fight like all these extra things. But otherwise, it's, you know.
Yeah, I did take the portrait down, but I never put it back up. I didn't know to do that.
Yeah, you have to You have to put it in the main hall of the mansion, which I only did because I stumbled upon the mansion. Okay, this is my one like frustration with the game, is that like the mansion is like kind of an important place for a couple different things, but like I could not remember any reliable way to actually get to the mansion. It was just like when I stumbled upon a door to the mansion, that's when I went to the mansion, and I could not figure out how to get to the mansion in any other reliable way. So like the fact that I was able to put the painting back, I was like, oh, cool. I stumbled upon that at exactly the right moment, but yeah.
Yeah, there's one or two doors in the overworld that I just remembered the location of to go back to.
But like with the chroma subplot, I was expecting then that would be how what's his name? Gustav comes back, right? Because in the early part of the game, they make like this really big deal about the Lumina converter and how it like captures the chroma of enemies that are killed nearby. And I was like, okay, then like they have the Lumina converter that was like attached to his arm. They kept the Lumina converter after they buried Gustav, and he died in the presence of the Lumina converter. So that means his chroma is inside that thing.
They sort of hand wave it a bit by saying that the chroma in the dead bodies of the people isn't pure enough for certain things. But again, that's much like the power leveling of the different painters. It's just left vague enough so they can get away with it, you know?
Yeah. I will say, I kind of felt the same as Ollie. Again, I'm going to bring up Dragon Ball. The ability to bring people back to life in Dragon Ball always sucked the tension out of a lot of situations, and I wasn't a fan of having characters that had recently died come back to life so quickly. I don't know whether to be happy about whether or not it didn't happen to Gustav, because on the one hand I'd be like, okay, that's just everyone back then, no consequences, but then on the other hand I'm like, how come not? Because you did it for everyone else.
Well, this is the thing, is that when you see Gustav come back in, we're skipping ahead a bit here, but in Myel's ending, I found it really disturbing. Like I don't know, to especially after you've watched him die this drawn out bloody death, when he comes back and he's just fine with, you know, Sophie, who you said an emotional goodbye to in the first half hour of the game, it's like, oh, that doesn't feel right. That's disturbing, and I think it was meant to, but it gives a really interesting perspective on the consequences of what Myel does if you choose her route.
Yeah. I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like they made such a big deal out of showing the Lumina converter and talking about the Lumina converter, and then it just like was nothing in the end.
Yeah.
It feels very much like that was set up for like when Myel does get her painter powers. That's what she does. And then they just kind of like got to that point and they were like, well, it's a little bit more impactful if we don't bring it back until the very end, so we're just not going to do that. But then they didn't get rid of all of the mentions and the talking about the Lumina converter to begin with.
The Lumina converter was supposedly the thing that's going to change this expedition compared to all the others.
Well, that's it, because none of the previous expeditions had a Lumina converter, so they didn't have access to Luminas, which means they couldn't be as powerful. Like, I think it theoretically means that in terms of game mechanics, the previous expeditions couldn't like level up as they went along, you know.
Some of us didn't even have access to Lumina either.
Some of us didn't read all the tutorials.
Ali, I didn't equip any Luminas until the end of Act 2.
I will give you, it's not super well tutorialized, and the UI isn't the best at pointing out that that's a menu you can go into.
Yeah.
But it is amazing that you got as far into the game as you did before realizing that it was even a mechanic.
I was super strong after, though. I was like, oh my god, this game's easy. Okay. Well, we've already started diving into the endings. Anything else you want to say about Myel's end? Do you feel like her just bringing back the people that she missed and then just like recreating a nice fantasy world where everyone's happy is a disturbing ending?
I think it is. My interpretation, I don't think it's necessarily intended for there to be a good ending and a bad ending, but I read Myel's ending as the bad ending. You know, it is her. You know, after Verso confirms that like she lied to Renoir when she said I'll come out eventually, and Renoir deep down knows that he's just not accepting it, and then he like this is the thing. She after the fight with Verso, and he's literally on the floor dying, pleading with her that he doesn't want to live this life, and then you cut to a scene where everyone's sitting watching him play a concert. Like holy shit, that feels so dark.
Yeah.
You know, like it makes Myel feel really villainous, but in the same way, when you're going back and making that decision, you can still sympathize with her motivation behind it. You know, it's not like she's just broken bad or anything. It's that no, I get it. I get why you don't want to live the life in the real world with the state that you're in and the things you've had to deal with, especially as she's 16, you know, and she's suffered this big tragedy. But it's like, no, this definitely feels fucked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't a difficult decision for me necessarily to pick Myel, right? Like, I did, like, when I got up to that point and I had to pick, I did hesitate for a moment. Like, it wasn't an immediate, okay, well, I'm only ever going to pick Myel, because it was like, well, yeah, like, Verso's soul or whatever deserves to rest. But, like, I feel like Myel's ending is, like, very selfish. But, like, I don't think Verso's ending is any less selfish. It's still selfish, just in a different way. Because, like, Verso has, like, there was this whole point prior to the ending where it's like, these people still do have feelings, and, like, what does it mean to exist? And it was kind of, I don't know, I felt like the story sort of settled thematically on existence is like whatever you make of it, right? So like if you truly believe that you exist and you get to live a life, then you exist. So like Verso still made the decision to take away those people's lives. Like he is the person that kills everyone. Like he did genocide an entire group of people. But like, yeah, I don't know. If it was a situation where like Myel, you know, recreated all of the people and then just like dipped out of the painting and then just let them live their lives like that. Like, that would have been the good ending. And the fact that there isn't really a good ending is, I think, a really good thing. Like, because there was no way. I think I would have been like deeply dissatisfied if I got to the end and I just picked one ending and it was like the bad ending, and I know that I could just completely invalidate the conflicting points of the like this
is the thing. I described it as the bad ending, but I know it's not intended to be. It's just that's how I've interpreted the themes of the narrative, you know, and it's totally in that place where it is that best kind of choice in video games where there really isn't a wrong answer, and we can debate back and forth about the pros and cons of each one, which is why for me it really fucking was a tough decision, because I felt it was coming because after the fight with Renoir it builds up to it and Myel and Verso start to argue, and then it just cuts to that screen of like decide the fate of the canvas, and I literally put my controller down and just leaned forward, head in my hands, and I was like that for like 5 minutes because I was just like, oh, I don't know. And I picked Myel, to be honest, just because I kind of liked her more as a character, because I couldn't work out what I preferred between the two big implications. So, but then immediately as like Verso's pleading for her not to do it, I'm like, oh, I made a mistake. I wish I chose the other option now. We basically just finished talking about the ending.
So that's Myel's ending. It's emotional. But of course there is also a Verso ending, and we've already touched on it, but so my interpretation of this is, of course, it's, you know, the fragment of the original Verso soul that he left in the painting when he originally created it. and it seems like to sustain that painting, it's enslaved into painting forever. Verso's tired. He wishes to sort of liberate that part of his soul. And I feel like Myel's reaction to Verso wanting to end it all here is like, it's almost like a slash between the denial and anger slices of the grief process.
Yeah, and you've got to remember it's a 16-year-old we're dealing with as well. Who this is probably the first grief she's ever experienced in her life. Mm-hmm. Outside of maybe losing a pet.
Yeah, and it's at the hands of the writers, so everyone will be emotional at that. But yeah, no, it's a tough one to fully reconcile with. But I do feel like Verso is the only one looking out for Verso.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, like it is like Verso's ending is still selfish, right? Because he is looking out for himself in a way. And like it is at the expense of these other people who like one way or another do vaguely exist. So like, yeah, but like as you said, like nobody else really cares about Verso, and like it feels like they care less once they realize that he's just like a painted mirage of Verso and not the real Verso.
Renoir wants the same outcome, but he wants it for his wife and daughter's sake, not the sake of Verso's soul.
Yeah.
But I do think it is a good point that I don't think Verso's ending does emphasize the weight of that whole world and all the lives in the canvas being destroyed as much as it probably should.
Yeah.
Is that because it's all a dream?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like it slightly misses how attached people would get. Like, I feel like the developers just slightly missed how attached people would get to the people inside the canvas in creating that ending. Like, they thought that, like, okay, once everybody realizes that it's not a real thing, it's just like, a mirage, essentially, that people would largely be fine with it. And I don't know. I don't think that's the case.
Not sure if that's
I think they underestimated very slightly how much people would care about them.
Maybe a little bit, but I do think that it's one of those things. In a few months, I hope they release the stats of what the percentages are for who chose which. Because I think more people will have chosen Myel. Because I know just out of us, it was 3-1 on choosing Myel.
Yeah.
What the hell, man?
And I do think it is a case of like, again, it's an interesting point of that choice almost puts us in the same shoes of the characters of like, oh yeah, we spent the whole game in this world. We spent about 30 hours in this world. This is the world we've become attached to, even though we're told it's not the real world. And I think people, they just don't want to see Lune and Ciel just disappear, And so I certainly wouldn't be surprised if it came out that like Myel was the overwhelming favorite in that choice.
Yeah, I think like it's I don't know, watching the Verso ending, like it is heart-wrenching, like watching all of these characters come to the realization that their existence is about to end. Right? Yeah. Like Lune in particular, like just like the defeated anguish that she experiences and shows in that scene is like, damn, like I don't feel good about that. But then it's like, it's there's no way to feel good about either ending. Like it's not like you pick one and like you get to feel happy afterwards, because there is no feeling happy afterwards, regardless of what you pick.
It's just a sense of I felt Verso's ending just gives a more complete sense of closure, at least for me, in terms of how I experience the story, which is why I think I prefer that ending, not quality-wise, just narratively,
Yeah, I think I'm with Ryan on that one. I feel like ultimately it is a story about grief, and it's never really a happy ending there. It has to be closure,
Because this thing I've thought of as well, because we've already heard that they're making a film adaptation. It's like, well, that means you've got to choose an ending. And it is one of those things, I feel like Verso's ending is probably like the default, oh, this is the ending we should probably go with. And they'll only go with Myel's ending if they want to be bold. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they're planning on picking doing a sequel like that does follow up the story of this game and revisits that family, like there is only one ending that it could possibly be.
Totally.
But like I think in the same way that like the Verso ending, like Verso was the only one like looking out for Verso, right? Like Myel or Alicia is like the only one really looking out for Alicia too. Like.
Yeah.
As Myel makes like abundantly clear when they're arguing about it, like taking away the painting is taking away Alicia's life. Like, right, she does not have a life outside of the painting. She just exists to be something that people look at and feel bad about. She can't talk. She can't really do anything. Like, she's not trusted by her parents to, you know, do painting or anything like that. It was only because Clair was around and she didn't really give a fuck that like Alicia was allowed to enter the painting anyway. Like it's an instance of where like she doesn't have much of an existence. She just sits there and stays quiet and tries not to get in anybody's way. So like it is one of those things where it's like in Verso's ending, like yes, thematically and morally, like that is the correct ending, right? That is the way that the story should end. But like it is a real bad deal for Alicia at the end. Like,
yeah,
she doesn't get anything good out of that.
And as you're approaching that ending, as you get some of the story in the side areas and the other journal entries, you do get the implication that as much as the characters romanticize now the time before Verso's death, you do get, they don't go into it too much, but I think he's fine because you could have got bogged down into it. But you do get the sense of like, oh, this wasn't necessarily like a happy family life before the tragedy. It's like, yeah, they were fine, but they weren't the most loving family ever.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I will say though, if they pick the wrong ending for the movie, then I think the writers are going to kill the directors. Okay. Right.
We're gonna zoom out another layer of reality.
Is there anything else that we feel like we need to cover here? I feel like we've done it reasonably comprehensively. Any
Pretty
emotions
much.
we got lingering?
I don't know. As I said, I feel like Clair is like kind of there to be like, if we want to do DLC, Clair is who we focus on for that. Because like we know that she not only has been into the painting multiple times, but has influenced events within the painting multiple times as well.
Well, yeah,
with prior expeditions and other stuff like that.
Yeah, the painted Clair boss that you can fight in the game is literally that's how they show that Clair is the most powerful painter in the family. Is that she painted over Aline's creation of her because she was like, no, I'm not having this.
Yeah,
you know.
So yeah, I feel like there are like lingering threads that like aren't big enough for a sequel, but are too big to just like left unsaid, leave unsaid. Like there is stuff that like that does need to be resolved in some aspect. Also, just want to say, one of the expeditions, I have to mention this to somebody because I thought it was amazing. Expedition 60. Absolute like fucking chads. They brute force their way through the barrier.
Yes. Oh my god, I remember this. Yeah.
They brute force their way through the barrier, and they literally like they discovered all of the secrets of the world. They were like 100% on track to like kill the paintress and Renoir underneath the tower. They like had it all figured out, and like literally the only reason that they didn't succeed is because it took them more than a year, and they just like poofed out of existence. Like that's so cool. I wish like And we know that like Clair interacted with them as well because she was the one that told them that like they were inside a painting and stuff. So something about Expedition 60 and Clair, I would love to see that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's why those checkpoints with the little flags with the number of the expedition are a fun little bit of world building. Because when you get into Act 3, most of the optional areas that you can only access through flying on Esquier are all Expedition 0 flags, which makes it interesting when you occasionally stumble upon one that's a different number. And you're like, oh, there's a story here that I need to know about.
Yeah.
So we're landing on Esquier.
Oh yeah.
Who knows?
I think
they
SK was the
never say
most.
it right.
I think there's some of them where that it just gets lost in their accent. They try to say SKA, but it just comes out as SK because their accents don't quite make it. But yeah, it is an odd one. SKA is the one that I use, and it's just it was also my first instinct, just based off the spelling of the word and knowing that all of the names have French pronunciations.
I swear, when you first met CL, I swear someone's just like, here's Seal. And Kiss from a Rose started playing in my head.
Her name took me a while to get as well.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it now. Thank you so much for listening to our in-depth ending and spoiler discussion for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. What is almost certainly going to be one of the best RPGs of 2025, and almost certainly in contention for the Game of the Year. Ryan, is it going to be your Game of the Year?
100%. I can't think of anything else that's going to top it. Unless Monolith Soft surprise launch a new Xenoblade game. Yeah, I can't think of anything that could possibly top it, because I love this game so much. It is definitely one of my favourite stories in a game ever. And cool. I know I'm still at like peak recency bias on it, but it is currently one of my favourite games of all time.
Ollie, do you think Donkey Kong Bonanza could beat it?
No.
Really?
I think the only game that we know exists that could beat it for me so far would be Hollow Knight Silksong, if it comes out this year.
Not even Pokemon Zaza or Metroid Prime 4?
No. I don't really care that much about the Metroid Prime series.
I'm not.
I think it's really good. And like Ryan and I are both like Xenoblade fans, and there's a lot of Xenoblade DNA in this game. Especially you get like
there are about 3 times during this conversation I've stopped myself from drawing a Xenoblade comparison.
Oh my god.
Okay, because one of the main themes is like defying fate, and I was like, somebody like literally says it out loud, and it's like our whole job here is to defy fate, and I was like, that's just a Xenoblade character. Yeah.
When Verso first appears by saving Myel after letting Gustav die, by the way, good move.
And he later admits to I could have saved him.
Yeah,
I chose not to.
Yeah, when that happened, I was like, this is strange, because in One Piece there is a sequence where a swordsman with a scar over one eye saves a child soldier from a man in a suit who's going to kill them. Yeah. And I was like, So, I feel it, Ryan. You can't... It's Boss Baby vibes, okay? All right, that's it. Let's finish this. Goodbye.
Ta-ra.